Welcome to the All In, All Out podcast. My name is Shannon Ross, founder and executive director of The Community. This podcast is focused on the goal of creating a justice system more worthy of that name, and why you, no matter who you are, should care. The name of the podcast refers to the fact that we must be all in and go all out to truly address the way justice is viewed and applied in America. Furthermore, the sense of separation the system imposes is an illusion. What happens to individuals on both sides of the fence is connected and tied to the same fate. How we treat incarcerated people reflects the state and direction of society. Those inside are all out, and those of us outside are all in. As for me, I am no more than a dreamer who knows there is a better way and is devoted to reaching out and holding on, even when it is uncomfortable, because connections and empathy are the foundation of the types of strong, healthy communities that we all want. I spent 17 years in the Wisconsin prison system, where I obtained my bachelor's degree in business administration, had several articles published locally and nationally, co-created a mental health program that now exists in several facilities throughout the state, and founded The Community. Upon release at the end of 2020, I obtained my master's degree in sustainable peace building at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, co-founded a successful multi-dimensional justice solutions firm called Paradigm Shift, became a first-time father, and I am currently a consultant at Marquette University's higher education and prison program. But these achievements have occurred alongside numerous and constant failures. Therefore, I, and however, remain all in and all out. This week, Kaleigh Atkinson and I spoke about the origins of the Correcting the Narrative campaign and its development. Back then, we even have the video, the first video we shot, which I think kind of outlines what the goal was. I think that the goal has not changed terribly, if at all. I think the focus on, for me, self-empowerment and the people, like those that have a record versus the society, that's a much bigger emphasis personally than it was when I first started out thinking that we're going to go tell people, to see us differently. Or not tell people, but just be more active about focusing on others instead of ourselves. So from the beginning to now, for me, self-empowerment and us as the focal point is like a little more important than the initial group, which was the main focus of society. So that'd be like, I guess, a summary for me of the difference. And in the way we do that, that's definitely changed. A lot of like strategical, artistic, interview questioning, all those aspects I think are different. But I think you've had a very different journey than I have in the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I could probably go into some of that a little bit more, but I guess what's the overall broad summary for you of what's maybe changed since that day?
I think when I was thinking about this morning, the mission early on was very personal for me. Mm-hmm. And I would have never met you had I not been impacted. So that became, all the work that we did together became really like something actionable that I could do. Cathartic, something that felt good. I felt people that finally understood kind of what I was going through, because I was doing all this on my own. It was really just, I didn't know at the time, but I had very much self-isolated and just become...
Justify and defend makes it easier,
Not at all. It was like a breath of fresh air.
Right.
And then it became my obsession. Mm-hmm. And like, you had a lot of work for me. And so I fully embraced that, and like volunteered and was just like, not only is this a creative outlet, it's something where I feel understood. I feel like I'm helping the masses versus just one person as an advocate. Mm-hmm. So it was super refreshing. And then I remember leaving after we filmed an expo meeting once. Mm-hmm. It might have been your birthday that day.
Yeah.
But I remember once we started doing more stuff in the community, and I would be like so hyped up and happy. And then I would like, the moment I put the equipment in my car, be like, oh, I'm alone again. And that was always really hard for me, like going home alone and like, oh, these people get me, these are my friends. But then I'd be like, are they? Do they know anything about me? So that was interesting. And then always like fantasizing, daydreaming, like he's going to be out soon. He's going to be part of this. Like these are going to be our friends. And like it was going to be a thing. So I was just always holding on to that hope. Yeah. But again, like going back to the mission being personal, it was like I was doing this as a means to kind of set him and I up in this life and this like community. And that was the goal, which clearly didn't happen. Yeah. And after like fast forward years, and then obviously the relationship not working out, I had a big moment where I was like, am I going to do this anymore? And is this the work that I want to be in? Why am I doing this? Was this all fake? Like, why would I want to help the people that I became the stereotype girl? And clearly this is a mission that I'm very passionate about. But it was just, I was kind of re-triggering myself every time. And then going into police stations, prison-like sets, you know, it was just, that was very hard. And
when was that? When was that time where you, so, you know, I have not always been, I think, so we've gone through stages of the friendship of being like really close and around each other. Then times it was like distance and we're like, I don't know you anymore. It's been like 3 weeks and there's been so much going on. And so what was going on at that time work-wise when you were in that, trying to see if you really wanted to continue with this?
I think it was editing, really, at that point. And then just, I mean, I became an employee of the nonprofit. So not only is it, like, we didn't have a lot of this type of work going on, and even just the screenings and being on camera and talking about this stuff, I'm like, I don't really care anymore. You know, I had a moment where I was like, I just don't really care. And that was my whole grief process of numbing and not looking at any of this, or looking at it in a way of like being angsty and angry and cynical and bitter, versus again the self-empowerment. And that's all what it always comes down to for me is like that just what you were saying. And then, I mean, Belize was huge, but there was a moment where I wasn't even, like the award ceremony, let's talk. So that, all of that whole process, I'm like in a very selfish, egotistical place in my mind. I'm like, why do I keep helping these people? When it's like, that, it just always came down to that. When you're a very good example of the people to celebrate. Adam is a very good, like that. We have hundreds, literally, I have hundreds of people that I could say, I just chose to love the wrong person. But again, at the end of the day, it all worked out because I'm here. I believe in your mission. I want to keep supporting the empowerment storytelling. But that isn't to say that it isn't triggering, and that some days I'm just like, I'm exhausted. I don't want to necessarily look at this, but I could say that with anything. Same with my yoga community. I meet people who are struggling. A lot of my friends are in recovery, and a lot of people, there's a lot of loss, there's a lot of relapse, and it's the same thing. It's just that stereotype of person didn't directly harm me, whereas this one did.
So do you feel like you have a time where you expect that to lessen or go away based off of, you know, super vague question, but maybe there's a process that you're familiar with from having gone through like grief or through loss, and you're like, okay, I'm at this stage for myself of that journey, or talking to other people, like where do you think that is at right now for you?
That's a good question, and I actually thought about this morning too. And again, kind of being the cynical, we both keep kind of poking fun at that, watching these, preparing for season 3, talking about relationships and how we're both the not successful one, or what, I don't know what the proper term is, but I'm like, I'm not heartbroken anymore. I'm not, there's a little bit of anger still. And then every time I'm thinking about me speaking about this, how do I not become the victim? And how do I also not talk shit about him? Because at this point, it has nothing to do with it. I could care less. And then it's a reflection on, okay, how do I take accountability for certain aspects of the relationship ending? What did I learn from this? What pieces of the story do I want to share to help others? And also, a part of me just wants to lay to rest, to be honest, and just be the girl behind the camera. I want those 4 years of my life to, like, the seed is growing now. I planted it, it's buried, and I want to start to flourish and rise above it. And I think I'm doing that. Also, part of me just wants to not look at it still, honestly. I learned why I chose that type of person. I learned why this was necessary and my karma growth, whatever. And now it's like, okay, next step, next stages. Yet I still want to work with you, for you, do these stories. There's such a piece of it that's so personal though, that it's hard at times.
So I have a couple more questions about that, but I want to step back and kind of respond with some of my deeper dive into where we are. And so I'm not somebody in this work that has this, we talked about this, right? Everyone can be saved, everyone deserves a second chance, you know, everyone can achieve their dreams, all that type of crap is just not the way we look at things. And I sometimes I don't know if that's something I should, over time I will probably speak about it more as I feel more comfortable, and I feel like I have a position in this work that I'm looked at as somebody to listen to, which is, I mean, you could say that's the case now, but I feel like it's not there enough that I can just very freely talk about the way I see things differently, because I see a lot of things differently, right, in life. Like, I'm always having to be very careful about the way I talk about stuff, because I am in a space where I don't agree with a lot of the traditional status quo views of the way we do this work. And so I don't want to like alienate myself or become this person to like, oh, we don't want to work with Shannon, he's saying these things. But yeah, I think a lot of that shit needs to be challenged. I just think we do a lot of stuff that is not, you know, I'm in a group chat, and the other day it was kind of a back and forth that we were all having, and somebody made a comment about like, oh man, this group chat, man, y'all be hating too much. And like, that is a mentality that a lot of people have. And it really is supposed to be, actually, people aren't hating enough. It's honestly the way I think it is. Like, we allow way too many things and just give thumbs up to stuff, or like, oh, I'm gonna let you live your life. Like, or ask more questions, challenge people. Like, I think that's the way to go. So that's just the thing that I always have to balance with in this work. And so when I look at the work that we're doing, I am always very much in the lens of, is this really a success story, right? Like, are you just too early to know it's a failure? Like, none of this is really failure or success. And my Buddhist, you know, type of views of things kind of kick in, and the duality and the lack of labeling anything, and nothing's ever success or nothing's ever failure. And so I just try to, you know, tell these stories and to highlight the fact that there are so many people that are not in line with the way that we do this work. And so it's not so much for me a matter of finding these clear distinctions to highlight and to demonstrate and to identify what's success or failure, what's correcting and what's not correcting, what's changing, all those, you know, nuances that we have. It's just a matter of, I think, always trying to challenge people to see the broadness of what they're looking at. And the beauty of that is there's like this Trojan horse element to a lot of the stuff that we do. I always like that as a general strategy. And in telling these stories of the demographic that is the only one that is legal to discriminate against in the country, if you can broaden people's understanding of that segment of the population, you can broaden people's understanding of any segment of the population, including themselves. Because if you don't have the acceptance and the forgiveness and compassion of this demographic, well, then that actually is commenting on the way you view yourself and people that are close to you if they do something, right? Because people in your life are going to do stuff, you're going to do stuff, maybe you might get locked up for a charge for whatever it is. So having like a place in your mind for when those events happen that you can say, you know, compassion, forgiveness, understanding, the breadth of the action is more than the person. That I think is beneficial for people in so many different ways beyond just our motive and our movement. And that's what I'm trying to lean into more with our events, is like, you know, hit hard on the way that, you know, the topic is so much broader than us. So, yeah, so that's kind of like where I have changed, I think, in the work, but also with the understanding and very similar feeling of like a lot of times looking at people and being like, is any of this going to matter? You know, is, you know, telling this story really a good one? Am I going to get a call in 6 months if we got to pull this video? You know, like we've already had to pull 3 people's videos from the first season. So yeah, it's just a very difficult element of the correcting work that we're doing. So
yeah, I think at first I was very, and I was, maybe I should say, kind of naive, optimistic, blind faith type person.
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot more jaded since we started with you. And then also just believing people's stories and like not going deeper and celebrating what people say and this cliche, actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
I've learned that more than anything. Whereas before I would just believe what you said.
Right.
And now, especially after, I mean, we're going to season 3, it's 4 years, us almost 3 years.
It's so December was just 3, so we're like a little bit past 3 years now. Yeah.
So then learning everything for 3 years now, and then being impacted for what, 5? Seeing how much you've changed, seeing how much I've changed, experiencing what I experienced from the person who started this journey, and then looking around the world, and like my worldview has completely changed. I would say I'm a lot more conservative. I would say I'm a lot less trustworthy. What else? I mean, even I still am very like freely giving to the homeless population or people who are asking for money on the street or outside of food. I will always offer to give you food. I will always offer to give you food. Typically I have protein bars, snacks, whatever, and I will give that. And then when that's very much looked,
No, you have a protein bar right now?
I have some mangoes in the car. I know you want those, but I'm not going to give them to you. No, they're fine. I already brought you a burrito and a coffee. And it's just the asking for the food and then offering the food and then saying, no, I want the money. Things like that's an example that I feel like has zoomed out and kind of been a more visual of how I've experienced life since kind of gotten having a bitter taste in my mouth. But I see that. It's like people say one thing, but they don't. That's not what they mean. And that's not just people who were firmly incarcerated. That's people all over the world in life. And trying to date after that relationship was a hot mess for a long time, and it's like I kept choosing that same type of person, and like people in active addiction or narcissism, and it's just like, what am I doing?
I think some of that, because we talked, I think you knew what you were doing. You were like actively trying to get away from the memory or the experience. But I think you knew, because we talked about it. You were like, I know this is not like, there was one guy in particular, and I was like, me and Adam were like, what is happening here? This person is far below Kaleigh's level. And so, but and when we talked about it, you were like, go away. I know what I'm doing. I was like, all right, that's your process. I'm not going to trip on you about it, of course.
But it's the ability to be able to look at the wound head on. And I couldn't. Like I couldn't. And then that was the last straw. When I finally got the courage to do it, that's when everything started to positively change. And all it really was again looking at the thing and feeling it fully in order so I could actually start to heal it. And that's when my entire life started changing and steps to where I am now, like literally about to live my dream, one of the dreams. But it was so painful, and I get it. I get why people don't look at it. Like that's why he's the way he is. He can't I don't know what's going on now, but from what I saw, it was like just the incapability to face the demons. And like, thank you that I was able to do that eventually, but it took a long time. And I mean, talking to therapists this morning was so cool. We got free group therapy at 10 a.m. But what she said about you, and she's like, you must be close to your mom. I was like, is this a spiritual journey? I was like, are we on a shamanism trip? You know what I mean? But she hit the nail on the head for both of us. I felt like, and I'm like, I've known you for 5 minutes. And it was super fascinating diving into childhood. And it's so complicated. And it's a case by case basis. And again, at the end of the day, like correcting the narrative for me was having to go through that and then figure out how I want to see my worldview and see myself. And then it just happens to be this work that we do also. But it's a really beautiful metaphor for just like you keep going back to self-empowerment and what does correct the narrative mean. I mean, I could talk about that for a very long time because we're focusing on this one group of people,
but it's all over.
No, and it's it's impacted you. When you stopped telling your story and your charge, like that was huge. I've definitely seen you change a lot and step into this
it has been interesting. I think last year especially. Sometimes I look back, like last year, we went from a $12,000 a year organization the year I got out, which was, I was only out for 3 months that year, so I don't know if you can count it, but that's the first year we actually got funding outside of just piddly donations from people and loved ones. And we went from a $12,000 organization in 2020 to, there's a very good chance we'll be $1 million by the end of this year. The way things are looking and the way funders are talking in recent conversations and stuff we've already gotten. And, one of our board members the other day, we had a meeting, and she was like, she's a nonprofit consultant. She's been doing this for a long time. And she says, let's just pause as a group here and acknowledge what's happened. Like this, I've been in this work a long time. She's like, this is not even close to a common thing that happens, that somebody raises this much money in that short amount of time. And so something about it, and I think about this too, I'm like, we haven't actually achieved shit, but we're getting a lot of support. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's the fact that I think we haven't had measurable outcomes or policy change, or I don't see active lives maybe being different. But it's my son, I don't see him taller from day to day. I don't even know if he's any taller than he was a year ago. But somebody who sees him 4 months later, they're like, oh my God, he's so tall. It's that's kind of how the work is. I think people see it and the impacts being had. you can't see it because, you know, you're too close to the tree, right? Like, you have to step back. And so, but yeah, just that element of it for me is some of the changes that I've had this past year with a lot of struggles. And while I'm going through those struggles, I'm like, I don't know if anything's different. And then you look back and you're like, damn, you know, this building, like, I made a video the other day of where it was just a year ago when me and Rocky first walked in, and I had video, and then today, and, you know, I was getting like teary-eyed, like, this is a lot of crap that's happened. This building, this life, it's like a living thing now with all this stuff here. The part for me that is interesting with what you keep talking about, because a lot of your, you know, story is the coming back from, you know, heartbreak. And it's the same things that you've asked me before that I'm like watching you, like you've watched me go through the process that I'm kind of watching you go through now, where I had to come out of this. My story is introducing myself. Shannon Ross, just got out a year ago. Like, that was like the first things I would say all the time, you know, and now I rarely ever mention it. I think the times when I do highlight it. So yeah, I would introduce myself like that a lot. And remember, you made a comment. You were like, somebody else that we know about, you know, when is that person going to stop telling their story that way? And that was like, for me, you know, like a challenging thing about, how much am I doing that? And so I still do it, but I do it from a way I think that is much more of a point within many other things. It's not like the highlight of the first thing. It's just, I feel it's different. Maybe I'm lying to myself about that, but I don't lead with that story. That's not my identity anymore in the way it used to be. So it is interesting, but seeing kind of you distance yourself from that as well, like, that's your incarceration, and you're like in your reentry process. Whoa. Right? And so kind of just watching you navigate that, and I can almost, as best I am, able to give back to you kind of what you gave to me as that thought partner. It's really cool, but it's also painful, but it's like, that's part of the process. It's like, I see that, I recognize that, and we all have that same journey of our prisons and then our reentry process and our stumble through reentry, and some of us never get out of it. We stay in the system forever. Like, what's that system? So it's just like, that is your version of the same thing that I'm going through in the stories we're profiling. So yeah, it's just really, so I don't want you to ever be attached to that story, but like, you know, that's kind of your bag, and that's your trial by fire. And, you know, you've had a lot of them in your life, I think, but this is one that I think, in this instance, it kind of has you go through the really soft period to the really hard period, and then you kind of get to a point where you're like, you know, it was all together. There was no like this or that I can say good or bad about. And I remember the time that for me was at the keyest point that you were traveling away from that was when you hit me up and you said, I want to, for me, I think of it as like animals. And I don't know if you made a comment about animals, but you're like, I don't want to have to justify this experience in my life. I just want to live and let it be something that exists. And it's like, you know, like an animal. An animal gets hit, it like whimpers, it runs off, it's eating a fucking leaf. It forgot about that shit, right? It's not holding on to that. It's like the quickest any of us can get to that point where we just like, that thing happened. If somebody brings it up, you're like, oh yeah, something did hit me when I was back there. But you're not carrying that with you on a day-to-day basis or an hour-by-hour basis. Like, that's the healing. Like, that's the time. And so I feel like I've been able to have that for a fair amount. I feel like when you get to that point, you start to seem callous to other people, but it's so much more complex. Like, for me, I'm not callous about the fact that I took a life. It's not that. I've digested that. I've gone through it heavily when I was inside. I've, you know, mined my psyche. I've looked at all the things as to why I did that and what does that mean. And I've bundled up what was useful and I've just left it, right? And that's not callous. It's not me like not having shame or guilt. It's just me knowing that that's not going to benefit me or anyone, and that's got to stay there. And so it's just, you know, yeah, same kind of thing I think that you're navigating right now. But
and I think that's what I respect the most about you, is that I don't know many people that have that. And such an extreme example. Yeah. I mean, that is the identification of healing yourself and taking accountability for what you did. And I think we live in a society where people just want you to suffer. Yeah. And the fact that you aren't suffering confuses people, threatens people. And it's also incredibly inspiring, empowering to the people who have done something similar or have gone through this process or are impacted in some way. Yeah. But again, it's just everybody suffers. Exactly. And it's just taking self-responsibility and not attaching to the negative. I think so many of us are trying to practice non-attachment, and yet you're obsessed with the thing that you're trying to get away from.
Right.
And like you're saying, you do have to go through it and process it. And I've done some pretty extreme meditation retreats, and like that's where I did, so the 10-day Vipassana, and then this last 3-day, that was after the breakup, and like when I really started to heal, and I'm like, it is time to go back and sit down and be quiet for a while. And so that 3 days, and when you're processing, you're not meditating. The whole point is to have an equanimous mind and to just run through the body until there's no more gross sensations. But what you find yourself doing, what I found myself doing, was processing and like ruminating over these things, which was necessary. But I'm like, I am not doing the technique right. I am not, you know what I mean? I was like, this is a selfish thing, a motive, like only go to your cushion when you need that. It's like, no, I'm done with that. So then once I realized that, I was like, okay, technique. And that's when things really started to shift and move, because I didn't want to be attached to it anymore. I wanted to just be alive and be okay, not happy and joyful, just okay. And you get that. And I knew that from very on, that there was just like this understanding. And I see that in Adam, you know, I see that in just, there's not many people, but like my circle is tight, because that's why I'm so involved in recovery community and some, because it's like, we've seen the darkness and we almost didn't make it, but we chose to take a step, you know, one day at a time. But it's like, that's true. And it's not even one day, it's like one breath at a time is where I'm at now. And I mean, it's really beautiful. You know, if you can look around like this window with the stuff on it, like it's fucking magical. I used to live right there when I was going to kill myself. Like every time I come here, it's crazy, the things, and I'm just like, wow, you are grown up now, you know? And even like thinking about, do you know the story of the monkey paw? That's what I was going to bring up.
I think so. I don't know why.
I'm going to butcher it, but it's like you make a wish. There's like this magical monkey paw. I don't remember.
It's not the pastry.
No, I mean, maybe there's a monkey paw pastry. I would not eat it. The butchered story is like, it's be careful what you wish for, basically.
Gosh, okay.
And so many of my dreams have come true working with and through this work, but at a like very deep cost. And I mean, I remember we were talking about your Belize experience, and you and Adam had like the moments that were really yours was your run. So mine was in that recovery room, and I was just like, this is number one, aesthetically, the most beautiful colors I've ever seen in my entire life, the most beautiful faces, which is again kind of selfish because it was like dirty feet, like a lot of hopelessness, but there was a lot of hope in that room. And there was like an aura and an energy that I have never felt. Like when we walked in there, it felt like we were stepping into the most beautiful church. And I'm not a religious person at all, but there is an energy when you walk into like a holy place. Like it felt sacred. And I was like, I'm in Belize with two of my best weirdo friends, like for work. What? With a bunch of people in prison. What is happening? I'm the only woman in who knows how many miles. And I was like, I'm so happy right now. This is a really weird place to be really freaking happy.
I remember when we left that room, your immediate reaction was, whoa.
I'd never felt that, but in that way. And it was just like, but for me, it was like, I remember I had a very similar experience in Bali when I went to a trance meditation or trance dance performance.
Trance or trans?
Trance.
Okay.
I remember seeing a show on National Geographic. They use their eyes and like different mudras, and it's very like technical and I was like sitting there by myself, just traveling and doing cool, weird stuff. And someone had just given me a free ticket, and I was like, yeah, I want to go. I've always wanted to see that since I was little. And I remember being like, one of your dreams is coming true. And I was like, oh, what? How lucky am I? This is incredible. And that was that moment in Belize. I was just like, whoa. But that would have never happened had that not happened. The thing in Bali would have never happened without another heartbreak. And it's like, once I started, again, I think that's just part of maturing, is like, it's these give and takes, and nothing's good, nothing's bad. It just is. And you have to like embrace the process and choose to see the beauty. That's what I've always had that in me, but I've always like executed it very poorly. And so now I'm being able to make conscious decisions, I think, whereas before it was like I was just so motivated by love and romantic, and even what Simone was saying this morning was like this need to be validated. I was like, again, I was like, oh, it's that easy to see? Cool, great.
But I don't think it's so much easy to see in you. I think it's that we are all, just like every day, and each individual, it's actually always the same. It's just different things, different stories, different names, but it's all cyclical, right? And like, the sooner we can get into this place where we get out of taking so many things personal and thinking that, you know, when people say like, oh my God, this is so crazy, or this thing happened, it's so painful. It's like, I mean, are you really different than anyone else? You know, like, we all think that our pain is the only pain in the world, and if we're in pain and somebody says something and like, can't you see I'm in pain? Like, we all are. We all are, pal. Like, we just navigate it differently. And so, yeah, I think it's not so much that she saw anything in you. It's just that situation, that circumstance, it's all the same. It's just the different names and experiences and who's behind the, you know, the emotion at that time. So. And
then something about you that, well, number one, like from the very beginning, like you are an anomaly, and you say that all the time. And then you, and again, Adam set such a standard for this population that sometimes that's hard to grasp with too. And I know you for sure,
Looking at Adam, like, I've, you know, there's a lot of times where I feel uncomfortable because I'm like, man, like, I can't even live up to what Adam is. Like, he's so considerate, you know, he's like super professional, you know, gentleman, all this type of stuff. I mean, well, outside of what people know about Adam with our group chats, yes, he's very, if you've never heard Adam talk to me, you'll think he's the most professional person in the world. But no, but yeah, just with that, like, there's times I'm like, I'm just, you know, doing what I can. But yeah, Adam sets a standard that is definitely not common. He's like 1 of 1% or whatever the hell you'd say there. But yeah, no, so same. Yeah, Roy too, though.
Yes.
I think Roy, like, we have some extraordinary characters in our group that are just not common at all, right? Like, Roy's ability to come after 28 years and just say, I'm going to take this at my pace, and that's what it is. Call me tomorrow. Like, that's how I've always respected it. I never push Roy and stuff because I know that he knows his boundary. He knows what he needs to do. He knows what's important to him, and he's going for it. That's all it is.
And the way spending time with Roy on the Alma Center bike ride, and then I'm obsessed with Roy. Again, he has a very like the energy that he emanates is just incredible. And when we were in Elroy. And he's like, I made that sign. Yeah. You know, I was like, what?
And he says it like,
what?
I've had that pizza. Like, he says it like the equivalent of just.
But remember, and then at East Release, when we were all like, I mean, again, that was like a fantastic day and like high vibe, I hate that, high frequency. And then you guys are all making jokes about the butter packets.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, I just got out of here, and then we have the butter packet. And then at Real Chili, when you're stacking the onions subconsciously, I'm like, what are you doing? Like the way, so I've been able to get a glimpse in the world, which I didn't know that I needed that lightness when I was in a prison relationship for 3 years, because there was so much, that was very heavy and very dark. And it was like, that was also COVID times. So like, I remember, but the funny parts of it, I totally missed, but then I got to celebrate that lifestyle. I still continue to do that with you. And I think that's something, that's like a really special thing that unless you were tied into this community, you would have no idea.
Right.
And again, like at the screening in Madison, and Roy was like, I made all of these signs in prison. It's like, what? Nobody thinks about that. Right. You might be like, oh, that's a cool sign, but you're not thinking about the hardship of the person who might be, like, this sign might have saved his life, or someone's like.
Like that sign for him saying that, it's same like with Adam, right? I mean, even to this day, me and Adam have never had like any deep conversations about his early days. I can just see sometimes the pain, you know, in thinking about certain components of it. Because this like the furthest he'll go is say something to the effect of, you know, I was really scared when I first went in, right? And so you can just take from some of the things he says, how big he was, the age he had, and you can extrapolate, you know, there were some really, you know, severe situations potentially that just you've never gone into. And so same with Roy, like when he's talking about these signs, I can think about like the days that you were just in the Badger State Industries, it was BSI at the time, office, and whatever was happening back at the unit that day. Just like the toil of that time is here in that one comment. Like there's all this background to that one line. I made that sign. But behind that is a whole book of things that he's not saying. The going forward part of the narrative work that I have grown into, I think is being like, when I first got out, I don't know if you saw this, I don't know if a lot of people knew this, but I would be really, really nervous anytime I would speak in front of a crowd, right? And I used to do spoken word and like concerts when I was inside. I was part of a group. I was the rapper for a band briefly, and I would always feel that nervousness going into, like, as an athlete inside. I played in championship games and playoff games consistently, and so I would always feel nervous when we were starting out. And then you get into it and you just forget about it and you're with the flow and all the nerves go away. And so, like, I always remember, it's kind of like food poisoning. You know, whenever I have food poisoning, I tell myself before it starts, you're going to feel like you're dying. You're not dying. Just power through. I promise you'll be okay. So same thing, like, you're feeling nervous, that's fine. You know, like, this is part of it. And I would feel that every time I got up on stage. And getting out during COVID for me was wonderful. Like, there's so many aspects of my journey that have been almost like divine. And it's interesting for a person who's solidly agnostic to, like, have this, like, I don't know what to do with that, right? And so, but now it's been maybe, I don't even remember when it changed, for at least a year. I have no issue getting on stage in front of anyone. Like, it is like nothing to me now. And so that's one part that I think now allows me to, when I'm in front of these rooms, and I can kind of feel a better chance of commanding stuff, or of, like, talking about stuff, and of emphasizing certain points or slowing down. I'm still not there. I'm working on it, you know, but I just think that's one of the areas that I'm looking forward to as we go forward. Myself and then the people we bring on to kind of train, just how do you really give someone else that correcting the narrative understanding, right, as much as possible. And then get them to understand that it's not just about this, it's about everything in life, right? I think that's where we can strike gold with the way we're doing this work. So that's my personal goal for this year, and just going forward, is to perfect that as much as possible, like a craft. And this is kind of, my craft, where I've been, for whatever reason, dropped into to, make something of myself, so. Kaleigh and I met December 2020, roughly 3 months after my release. Since then, we have produced dozens of videos and events around correcting the narrative to showcase the successes, humanity, and agency of people that have criminal records. It truly is striking for me to see how foundational storytelling has become in my position within liberation work and the reform, reentry, decarceration movement nationally. The foundation of virtually everything is a narrative about how we view that thing, and storytelling is the most important component of counteracting and maintaining a narrative. It shows up in my personal life and professional life all day, every day, as I navigate misunderstandings, pettiness, both within myself and other people, hope and hopelessness, empowerment, and opening hearts and minds to the possibilities and limiting stereotypes applied to populations and individuals. As events and interviews occur throughout this season and beyond, we will be emphasizing the importance of learning how to carry one's story, what I refer to as the physics of shame and guilt. And we will emphasize challenging others to ask better questions of those who have a criminal record, so as to foster and strengthen empowerment rather than instability and stagnance. We will be holding, and possibly may already have held it by the time this episode is released, our first out-of-state event, with several more in the planning stages. So if you would like to partner for one of these events in your city or town, please reach out to us. And our 4th annual celebration later this year will be comprised of a full day of activities, including a screening and panel of our 3rd season of Correcting the Narrative videos, centered on relationships with currently and formerly incarcerated people. Our annual celebration will be in the early evening that day, and a large interactive art installation will take place throughout the day, detailing the past, the present, and the possible in our criminal legal system, and the path to creating a justice system more worthy of that name. Stay tuned for exact details on that very soon. Again, if they haven't already been posted via our site, social media, and email blasts already. And I cannot have a segment focused on our Correcting the Narrative campaign and the impact it has and will have as we expand and constantly improve it without thanking Kaleigh for all her time, brilliance, and energy that she not only put in during the first year for free, but that she has continued to invest in my personal navigation into free life to help me move my record more and more to the footnotes of my story rather than the headline. And I will forever pay it forward. Thank you for listening. Peace.